For 38 years, the Sundays at Philomena's house smelled of percolator coffee and orange blossoms. That was how the week began, and that was how it ended. With that sweet smell drifting in through the kitchen window and clinging to the curtains until Monday. Sundays were sacred, not because of church, though she went to the 8 o'clock service, but because of the routine. Because of the coffee Elliot brewed himself in the old blue enamel pot. Because of the worn-out newspaper he read out on the back porch while she sliced fruit. Because of the comfortable silence between two people who no longer needed words to keep each other company. Lanesborough is a mid-sized town in the southern part of the state, about 2 hours from the city, tucked between low hills and orange groves. There's still a sugar mill that runs, and a freight line that hardly ever carries anything anymore. The old railway neighborhood where the Cates family lives grew up around those tracks back when the tracks were the center of the world. Now it exists like a memory nobody wants to let go of. Low houses, whitewashed walls, purple bougainvillea spilling over the fences, dogs sprawled out in any patch of shade they can find. Philomena and Elliot's house sat 3 blocks from the old depot building. 2 bedrooms, a kitchen, a front room with a black foot-pedal Singer sewing machine in the corner, and a backyard with 2 orange trees he had planted himself in 1979, plus a lemon tree that always refused to give much fruit. On June 14, 2025, Philomena was sitting at her Singer, finishing the hem on a skirt a neighbor had asked her to take in. It was 4:15 in the afternoon. The heat had loosened its grip a little, though the air in the yard still carried that thick, sticky weight of summer, that air that smells of warm earth and faded blossoms. Elliot was outside on the porch, pruning the orange tree on the right. He had on his blue plaid shirt, the old one, the one he liked for that kind of work. Philomena could hear him from the front room, the steady rhythm of the shears, the soft grunt he made when he stretched to reach a high branch, the scuff of his boots over the dry leaves. At 4:18, the sound stopped. There was no cry, no warning, just a dull thud, the way a heavy sack sounds when it hits the ground. And then nothing. Philomena lifted her head from the machine and waited a few seconds, because sometimes Elliot crouched down to pick something up and took his time. The silence in the yard stretched out too long, and that was when she knew, with the cold clarity that wives of many years sometimes have, that something had happened. She got up, walked toward the kitchen door, and looked outside. He was on the ground, flat on his back, the shears still in his right hand. His face was peaceful, his eyes open, looking up at the sky without seeing anything. A freshly cut branch lay beside him, above him the orange tree only half pruned, the left side still tangled and unkempt. What followed was the rest of that afternoon, and the whole night, and the next morning. But Philomena wouldn't remember those hours clearly. Afterward, she would only remember pieces. The neighbor, old Mr. Barlow, running down the walkway with the phone in his hand. The ambulance that took 22 minutes to arrive, because the one unit in Lanesborough was busy with something else on the far side of town. The paramedic's hand on her shoulder, the words they said to her, words she didn't hold on to. The voice of her son, Owen, on the phone, cracking, repeating, Mom, I'm coming, don't move, I'm on my way." The wake at the Hartley funeral home over on Sycamore Street. The rosary led by a woman from the parish that Philomena didn't even know well. The burial in the town cemetery, in the plot Elliot himself had bought 20 years earlier, when his mother died, and had kept paid up every year since, because that was who he was, a man who paid for things on time. They buried him on a Tuesday. By Friday, Philomena was already alone in the house. Owen had to go back to the city because his wife, Janet, was home alone with the kids, and he couldn't miss any more days at the shop. Randall, the younger one, the one who had moved to Houston 11 years ago, couldn't come. He said they wouldn't give him the time off, that the construction job wouldn't let him take a trip, that he was so sorry, that he was sending a hug to his mother, and that soon he'd sort things out and come. He wired money, he called twice. The second call lasted 4 minutes. Philomena hung up without crying. She cried later, but not in that moment. She was 68 years old, and she had been married for 47 of them. Before Elliot, she didn't remember much, or she remembered it the way you remember things that happened to somebody else. She had married at 21. He met her at a church fundraiser in the summer of '72, when she was selling lemonade and iced tea at a little stand, and he came over 3 times to ask for a refill, just to get a look at her. He was 23. He was lean back then, with big hands and a black moustache he'd only just grown in, and he had worked since he was 15 on the freight line that ran through Lanesborough. He was a railroad man, the son of a railroad man. He spoke little, but the words he did say he kept. On one of those fundraiser afternoons, the 3rd time he came over to the lemonade stand, he told Philomena that if she would wait for him outside the church the following Sunday, he'd take her for a walk around the square. She said she'd have to ask her mother. Her mother said yes. That boy had the face of a serious man, and he was serious. Philomena saw him the following Sunday. She saw him again the one after that. By the 3rd Sunday, he was already taking her for ice cream down at the town square, and by the 10th Sunday, they were sitting together on the back bench of the church grounds, hardly saying anything, because nothing needed saying. Philomena came from a house where nobody kept their word, where her father had left when she was 9 and never came back, never sent a thing, where her mother raised 4 children taking in other people's laundry. In Elliot, she found what had always been missing, someone who showed up at the hour he said he would, someone who, when he said, "Monday, I'll pick you up at 6, picked her up Monday at 6, not a minute late. Someone who, when Philomena said, "I want to marry you," said it once, and then started saving for the wedding without bringing it up again until the day he had the money set aside. They married in 78. He was 27, she was 21. The wedding was modest in that same church, with rice thrown at the doorway and a dinner of pot roast made by her aunts in the backyard of her mother's house. Owen was born the following year in 1979, a long labour at the county hospital. Randall came in 85, faster, easier, a calm baby from his very first cry. Between the 2 of them, there was a pregnancy Philomena lost at 5 months, a little girl who was never born and whom she privately called Hope because she never said the name out loud. That loss stayed tucked away between her and Elliot, the way you keep things that are never spoken of again, but never forgotten either. Life was what it was for a railroad family in those years. Work, supper, public school, a black and white television first and then a color one, a used car in 92, a new washing machine in 96, walls repainted every 4 or 5 years whenever they could manage it. The ordinary things of ordinary people. Elliot moved from the railroad to the Lanesborough sugar mill in 84, when the freight trains started to thin out. He stayed at the mill for 38 years, until he retired in 2022 at 71. Philomena sewed at home. Hems, cuffs, First Communion dresses, jacket alterations, wedding gowns for the girls who couldn't afford a new one. The buttons she had left over she kept in an empty mayonnaise jar. 213 buttons by the year 25. Each one with its own story, each one telling something about someone. And the Sundays were always the same for 38 years. She made breakfast around 7:30. He read the paper. Sometimes they both went to church, sometimes only she did. They'd come back, eat something light, a bit of soup, some eggs and beans, a salad. And around 2 in the afternoon, twice a month, Elliot would get up, put on a clean shirt, grab the keys to his rust-red Ford pickup, and say the same thing. "I'm going to help my buddy Theodore with a fence. I'll be back before dark." Or sometimes he'd say, "I'm heading into the city with the union guys. We've got a meeting." He always came home before 7. He always came back with dust in his hair. He always showered before supper. And never, not once in 38 years, did Philomena ask exactly where he had been, or with whom, or why those outings always fell on Sundays and no other day. Because she trusted him. Because that was how the women of her generation had been raised in the railroad neighborhood. Because the man brings home the living, the man goes out, the man comes back, and the woman doesn't ask. And because Elliot, when he came home, brought with him a quiet peace that she had read for decades, as the happy tiredness of a man who has done his duty. She read it wrong, but she didn't know that yet. In the first days after the burial, Philomena walked through the house like someone walking through a strange room. Things were still in their places. Elliot's coffee mug on the upper shelf, the handle chipped on the side where he always gripped it. His work boots by the kitchen door, dry dirt still caked on the soles. His straw hat hanging from the nail on the porch post. His Gillette razor and his Yardley aftershave, which he had used for the last 20 years without ever changing brands, sitting on the bathroom ledge, all of it there, all of it waiting for him. And he was never coming back. She folded his clothes, separated what could be given away from what she would keep, washed the sheets twice, 3 times, 4, until the smell of his body was almost completely gone. And when it was gone for good, Philomena regretted having washed them so much. She put the shoes in boxes, packed away the mustache comb, the razor, the aftershave, the eyeglasses he hardly used anymore. She cleaned the yard, watered the orange trees. She couldn't bring herself to finish pruning the one he had left undone. That high branch on the left side, the one Elliot never reached, stayed there, tangled, like a reminder she didn't want to take down. Mr. Barlow, the neighbor, offered to finish the pruning 2 or 3 times. Philomena always told him, "Thank you, Mr. Barlow, but not yet." And Mr. Barlow, who is a man who understands those things, never pushed. The neighbor across the street, Tessa, came over almost every morning to have coffee with her. Tessa is 72, a widow too, and has been for a long time. She has 3 married daughters and 7 grandchildren. And she has known Philomena since 79, since the Cates family first arrived in the railroad neighborhood. Tessa didn't talk about Elliot, because she knew you weren't supposed to. She talked about her grandkids, about the price of bread going up again, about the new pastor who wasn't as good as the last one, about anything that would keep the silence from creeping into Philomena's kitchen in the mornings. And Philomena was grateful without saying so. The 2 of them would sit and have coffee with a sweet roll, and Philomena would sometimes stare at the empty chair across the table, the chair where Elliot used to sit, and say nothing. And Tessa pretended not to notice. Around the 3rd month, Owen came back from the city for a weekend and asked if she had sorted out the paperwork. The bank papers, the house, the insurance, the senior benefits, the utility accounts, the things that had to be kept current. Philomena hadn't touched any of it. She couldn't. She'd open the drawer where Elliot kept the documents and close it again, open the drawer and close it again. Owen sat down with her one whole afternoon, and they went through everything. The house was in both their names. The truck was in Elliot's name, but with her as the beneficiary. The mill's insurance paid out what it was supposed to, a modest sum, but enough to keep her from going short. The pension started arriving in the 3rd month. Nothing strange, nothing out of place. The life of an orderly man filed away in yellow folders. "And this drawer here, Mum? Is there anything else?" Owen asked, pointing at one of the wardrobe drawers she'd left unopened. "No, son, those are just old things of his. Clothes he didn't wear anymore. I'll clear it out little by little." Owen nodded. He didn't push. He stayed 2 nights and left early Monday. He left Philomena an envelope of cash and a promise to come back in December with the kids. Philomena watched him get in his car and drive off down the railroad street, and when the car turned the corner, she went inside, sat down in the front room, and stared at the singer for a long while without sewing. She was alone again. The buttons in the mayonnaise jar had, over those months, become a secret kind of company. Philomena couldn't sleep well after the burial. She'd lie down at 11, wake at 2 in the morning, and not be able to fall back asleep. She'd get up, go to the front room, turn on the little lamp on the dining table, take the jar down from the upper shelf above the singer, and empty the buttons out onto an old cloth. She'd sort them by color first, the whites, the blacks, the browns, the gold ones, the colored ones, then by material, the plastic ones, the bone ones, the metal ones, the shell ones, the wooden ones, then by size, separating them into little piles, like a child playing. Each button reminded her of a garment. That gold one was from the jacket she altered for her friend's daughter's wedding back in 2003. That big black one was from a coat she'd taken in for a woman heading north for the winter. That other one, bone with 4 holes, was from Tessa's oldest granddaughter's first communion dress, a dress Philomena had let out twice, because the girl kept growing. The buttons held stories no one else remembered, and Philomena held on to the buttons. It was her way of holding the world together. One night in January, when it had been 8 months since the burial, Philomena opened Elliot's wardrobe to finally take out the last of his suits. She had left that wardrobe for last, not because there was much in it. Elliot wasn't a suit man. He had 3 or 4 at most, the ones for weddings, the ones for funerals, the one he wore when the boys graduated. But she hadn't wanted to touch it. That wardrobe was the last thing that still had his smell on it. The smell of his aftershave, the smell of his old sweat, the smell of Sundays that would never come again. That night, she finally dared. It was 10:30. Tessa had already gone home. The radio was off. Lanesborough was quiet outside, with that small town quiet after 10, where all you hear are the crickets and some far-off dog. She opened the wooden door of the wardrobe. Inside hung the man's few formal clothes: a white short-sleeved shirt, 2 dress shirts, one pale blue, one white, a pair of grey trousers, a complete black suit, the one for funerals, and a very old brown tweed jacket that Elliot had bought at a yard sale back in the 90s and had worn no more than 3 times. Philomena took it out. She was going to give it away. The jacket smelled of mothballs and something else, something like old cedar. It weighed more than it should have for its size. She was folding it over the bed when she felt something. On the inside of the jacket, on the left side, at the level of the ribs, there was a small, hard lump. Philomena ran her hand over the fabric. Yes, there was something inside, something wrapped up. The lining had a seam, an old seam, sewn by hand, but not a factory seam. It was a strange seam, unpicked and sewn back up with thick thread, as if someone had opened the lining to put something inside and then closed it up badly. Philomena knew seams. She sat down on the edge of the bed with the jacket across her lap. She took her little scissors out of her apron pocket. She always carried scissors. She didn't know how to do anything else, and carefully, with the same patience she used when she fixed a wedding gown, she undid the stitches one by one. She didn't tear them. She undid them the way you undo delicate things. When she opened the lining, she reached inside. The first thing she felt was the cold. The object inside was metal, and the metal, after being shut away so many years in the darkness of the wardrobe, held that particular cold that forgotten things have. The second thing she felt was the texture, rough, coarse, with small bumps like scabs. It was rusted. Philomena squeezed it between her fingers for an instant before pulling it out, and the rust stuck to her fingertips with that dry, sandy feel of metal that has been quietly decaying for a long time. She pulled it out. There, on her open palm, under the yellow light of the bedroom lamp, lay an old key, one of those antique ones with a round head and 2 long teeth, almost completely covered in orange rust, a key that hadn't touched a lock in many, many years. The rust stained her fingers brick red. Philomena held it a moment, as if it were some unknown insect. Then she noticed the key was wrapped in a folded piece of paper. She unfolded the paper carefully, because the damp of years had made it fragile. It was a piece of lined notebook paper, the kind from a school notebook. It had a deep crease down the middle. And on the other side, written in Elliot's hand, that big handwriting slanted to the right with the loops wide open, the handwriting she had known for 47 years, from notes left on the table and signatures on receipts. It said only this: Swallowtail Ranch, Greenbrier County, Route 9, Mile 12, the dirt track. Ask for Josie. That was all. Philomena read the paper 3 times, then 4, then 5. The handwriting wasn't in question. It was his. She knew it down to the little tremble in the tail of the J. She turned the paper over, looking for something more. There was nothing else, only that. A ranch name, a location, and a person's name. Josie, a woman's name. Philomena sat on the edge of the bed for a long time, the rusted key in one hand and the paper in the other. The room was silent. Outside, in the railroad neighborhood, the dogs were barking at some far-off noise. The clock in the front room struck 11. Then 11:15. Then 11:30. Philomena didn't move. She didn't cry. That's the strange part. She didn't cry. You'd expect, watching from the outside, that a woman widowed 7 months, sitting on her husband's bed with a rusted key in her hand and another woman's name on a piece of paper, would cry. But Philomena didn't. What she felt was something different. It was as though the ground beneath her feet, the ground she thought she knew so well, had become some other ground. It didn't break. She didn't collapse. It simply stopped being what she thought it was. And now she had to find out what it was. She put the key and the paper away in the top drawer of her nightstand, beneath an embroidered handkerchief that had belonged to her mother. She lay down, turned off the light, closed her eyes. She didn't sleep. At 4 in the morning, she got up, went to the front room, took out the jar of buttons, and sorted all 213 of them by color, by material, by size. When she finished, dawn had already come, and the roosters in the yards behind were already crowing. Philomena sat for a while, watching the light come in through the window, watching the room become visible again, watching the sorted buttons on the cloth take on the real colors of the day. Before I go on with this, let me ask you something. If you're listening to this story right now, stay with Philomena. Keep her company. This woman has just found something that's going to change everything. And something tells me that you on the other side of the screen understand what it's like to be left alone with a truth you never expected. Subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Hit the like button on this video so more people like you can find this story, and leave me a comment with the name of the town or city you're watching from. Write your town. Philomena won't hear you, but I will. And I like knowing what corner of the world someone sat down in tonight to listen to what happened to a widowed seamstress from a small town. Now let's continue. The following Monday, Philomena didn't say anything to anyone. She didn't call Owen. She didn't write to Randall. She didn't tell Tessa, who had been her confidant for 30 years, who came by for coffee almost every morning. She didn't say a single word. She wrapped the key in a clean handkerchief and put it in her purse. Beside the key, she folded the paper in 4 and tucked it into the same pocket. She went out to the market to buy vegetables, like always. She came back, ate soup, sewed 2 hems. She thought of nothing else all week but that ranch and that woman. Josie. She turned the name over in her head. Josie. 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 She had never heard Elliot mention a Josie, not once in 47 years. It wasn't the name of a relative. It wasn't the name of a neighbor. It wasn't the name of a co-worker, because at the mill he had worked with nothing but men. Josie. Philomena went through all the women Elliot could ever have mentioned. His mother was named Lucy, his sister Paula. His sisters-in-law were Maggie, Edith, and Lou. His close friends' wives were Adeline and Aurora. The neighbors he greeted were all familiar names, not one of them a Josie. And the Sunday outings. Now every memory of every Sunday over 38 years began to replay in her head through a different filter. Elliot putting on a clean shirt. Elliot saying, "I'm going to see Theodore." Elliot saying, "I'm heading into the city with the union." Elliot coming home before 7. Elliot smelling of dust. Elliot quiet. His buddy Theodore had died in 2011, and Elliot had kept going out on Sundays. That Philomena had never thought about. He had kept going out. After 2011, what buddy Theodore was he helping build fences with? He had changed the excuse without Philomena noticing. He started saying, "I'm heading into the city with the guys. I'm going to the mill to check on something. I'm going to look at some parts for the truck." And she, distracted by her sewing, by her buttons, by her sons, by her hems, had kept nodding along the way you nod at things that have become part of the scenery. Now the scenery had holes in it. There was one Sunday in particular that came back to her in those days. It was from 2016, if Philomena remembered right, or 2017. Elliot had come home from one of his outings with his shirt stained with blood on the right side near the shoulder. Not much blood, a stain about the size of a lemon, already dry by the time he got home. Philomena had asked him what happened. Elliot said he'd snagged himself on the wire of a fence he was repairing, that he'd scratched himself, that it was nothing. Philomena washed the shirt with cold water and bar soap, and the blood came out. She had forgotten all about it. She had forgotten it for 9 years. And now, in the light of the rusted key and the paper with Josie's name, that blood stain took on weight again. What fence? Repairing what? For whom? There was also a Sunday in December, the one in 2019. That Sunday, Elliot had come home later than usual, almost 9 at night, and had walked into the house with a look of complete exhaustion. He had sat down in the kitchen chair without a word, and Philomena had poured him a coffee. Elliot drank the coffee in silence. Then he had said, like someone saying nothing important, a single sentence. "Sometimes, dear, a man does what he has to do, even if nobody knows." Philomena had nodded. She hadn't asked what he meant. She had thought in that moment that it was a tired man's remark, an older man's reflection. She had gone over, put her hand on his shoulder, and gone back to her own things. And now that sentence came back and landed on her like a stone. Sometimes a man does what he has to do, even if nobody knows. Do what? Why nobody? Why not even me? Philomena felt that the memory of her marriage, which she had considered closed and orderly, like the buttons in the jar, was opening back up. But now they weren't buttons sorted by color and size. They were buttons all mixed up, jumbled together, some with no match, some with holes she hadn't seen before. On Tuesday, Philomena took out an old road map from the document drawer, a state highway map that Elliot had bought in 2004 when they started taking the occasional trip. She spread it out on the kitchen table. She looked for Greenbrier County. There it was, northeast of Lanesboro, about an hour and 15 minutes by truck. It was a small county, cattle country, goat country. Philomena ran her finger over the map. Mile 12 of the dirt track had to be outside the town, in the rural stretch toward the hills. She had no driver's license. She had never learned. Elliot always drove her whenever she needed to go far. That detail, too, now weighed on her differently. She had never learned to drive. She had never gone anywhere on her own that was more than half an hour from the house. Elliot had handled everything that involved going out, and she had accepted it. It had seemed convenient, even sweet, that he drove and she sat beside him. Now, with the ranch paper on the table, that lack of a license seemed like something else. It seemed that he had preferred she not know how to drive, that he had arranged for her to always depend on him to get anywhere. She didn't think it with bitterness. She thought it only with a faint chill. For 3 nights, Philomena went to bed with the key on the table beside her. She left it there on top of a handkerchief, where she could see it when she woke. The rusted metal under the lamplight had something almost alive about it, something that pulsed in the silence of the room. She would pick it up sometimes, hold it against her closed palm. She could feel the cold even after all that time, the rough cold of the rust, and she would wonder how many times Elliot's hand had carried that same key, what door it had opened, and above all, when. The rust stuck to her skin. Philomena washed her hands with hot water, and the brown stains came off the edges of her fingers, but the feeling didn't. The feel of that rough metal stayed stuck to her skin like a mark the water couldn't wash away. The first night, around 3 in the morning, she squeezed the key so hard that when she opened her hand, the outline of the 2 teeth was pressed red into her palm. She stared at the mark. She thought that her body was already starting to keep memories of that key before her mind even knew what to do with it. On Thursday, Philomena went over to Tessa's house with a sewing excuse. Tessa had a nephew, Andrew, who ran hauling jobs between Lanesboro and the small towns. Without telling Tessa why or what for, Philomena asked if Andrew would be willing to take someone to Greenbrier County the following Sunday morning and wait to bring her back in the afternoon. Tessa looked at her for a moment with that look old neighbor women have, the look that knows everything, but she didn't ask anything. She only said, "Are you going alone, Phil?" "Yes," said Philomena. "It's something of mine," Tessa nodded. "I'll talk to Andrew. I'll let you know tomorrow." "Thank you, dear." Philomena left Tessa's house with the feeling that something inside her had shifted a little. It wasn't the key. It wasn't the ranch. It was that she had told someone for the first time in her life that she had a matter of her own, a matter that was hers. That wasn't Elliot's. That wasn't her son's. That wasn't the neighborhood's. Hers. At 68. It struck her as strange. It also struck her, with a small recognition she couldn't name, that it wasn't a bad thing. On Friday, Andrew confirmed through Tessa. $50. He would leave Sunday at 7 in the morning, drop her wherever she said, and wait, or pick her up at whatever time she arranged. Philomena took the money from the envelope Owen had left her last time. She put it in a folded sock inside the wardrobe, ready for Sunday. Saturday was a long day. Philomena tried to sew and couldn't. Her fingers kept slipping. She pricked the needle twice in a row into the tip of her index finger. She put the sewing away, went to sweep the yard, and ended up standing in front of the orange tree with the unpruned branch, doing nothing, just looking at the branch. She made a noodle soup she had no appetite to eat. She ate half. She washed the dishes, watched the television without seeing it, turned the television off, sat down in the front room, stood up, sat down again. As the afternoon faded, she went out to the yard and sat in the chair where Elliot used to sit and read the paper on Sundays. It was a wooden chair with a cushion of little blue flowers that she herself had sewn. The chair creaked a little under her weight. Philomena sat there, looking at the sky going pink over the hills to the east. She spoke under her breath. To no one, to him, to the air. "What did you do, Elliot?" The orange tree didn't answer. A bird crossed the yard. A leaf fell. "What did you do, old man?" She stayed there until the first stars began to come out. Then she went inside, bathed in warm water, put on her white nightgown and lay down. She set the alarm for 6 and turned off the light. She slept almost nothing that night. She dozed in spells, woke, dozed again. She dreamed that Elliot was in the kitchen, standing in front of the stove with his back to her, and that she was asking him who Josie was, and that he stayed with his back turned, not answering, and that when he finally turned around, the face that turned toward her was not Elliot's, but the face of a man she didn't know. She woke up sweating. It was 4:30. She didn't try to go back to sleep. She bathed in cold water because the heater was slow and she had no patience. She put on a dark dress, not black, because she had already closed her mourning at 6 months, but dark, navy blue, with little flowers. She put her hair up in the low bun she always wore. She looked at herself in the bathroom mirror. Her left eye sat a little lower than her right, like always, the drooping eye she had lived with her whole life. She arranged her bangs to hide it, the way she'd done since she was a girl. She put on the small gold necklace Elliot had given her on their silver anniversary. She put it on because she had no other. Though afterward she stood looking at the necklace in the reflection and wondered if she should take it off. She didn't take it off. She grabbed her purse, put the key and the paper inside, put in her wallet with the money for Andrew, put in a rosary her mother had left her, though she didn't plan to pray, but it would keep her company. She put in a bottle of water and 2 oranges from the tree in the yard, which were still a little green but smelled good. She locked the house at 6:50. She walked the 4 blocks to where Andrew was going to pick her up, on the corner by Mr. Dawson's store. The sun was already coming up over the hills to the east. In the railroad neighborhood, a rooster crowed. A stray dog crossed the street behind her without looking at her. It was cool out. The air carried the smell of damp earth, though it hadn't rained. But that's how the railroad neighborhood smells at that hour, like earth breathing after the night. Andrew arrived at 7 on the dot in a blue pickup with stakeside rails. He was a thin man of about 50, his cap pulled down with a sparse mustache. He didn't ask anything. Philomena climbed into the passenger seat. Andrew pulled away. They left Lanesboro on the road to Greenbrier County. The road climbed, first through orange groves and then through low brush, through mesquite and yucca, country of stones and goats. The early Sunday light was golden and clear. Philomena watched the landscape pass without really seeing it. She had the rusted key inside her purse on her lap. She could feel it through the fabric. The metal still cold, still rough, still alive. They passed a small settlement called St. Andrew's, with its white chapel and its cross in the little square. Andrew said nothing, and neither did Philomena. The truck radio was off, but Andrew had a plastic rosary hanging from the rearview mirror that swayed with the bumps in the road. Philomena found herself watching that rosary sway. She watched it sway for many minutes. It was a rhythmic, calm movement, almost hypnotic, as though it were another heart inside the cab, beating to the rhythm of the road. 10 minutes later, a double trailer truck passed them going the other way at full speed. The air inside the cab shuddered. Andrew steadied the wheel. Philomena grabbed the door handle. "These roads," said Andrew, the first words in a long while. "A person's got to be careful." "Yes," said Philomena. They didn't speak again until Greenbrier. After an hour and 5 minutes of driving, they reached the town. It's a small town, white, with a central square and an old gazebo. A church with a 2-bell tower, a few shops around it, a tortilla shop steaming through its doorway, a man sweeping the sidewalk in front of his store with a palm broom. Andrew asked Philomena which way. Philomena showed him the paper. Andrew read it under his breath. "The dirt track to the ranch," he said. "We've got to go out the other side of town. I sort of know it. We'll ask if we need to." They crossed Greenbrier. Andrew stopped once to ask a man sitting outside a corner store about the track toward mile 12. The man told him yes, keep going straight, cross the creek bridge, and at the 3-mile mark, the brush opens up and the gravel road starts on the right. Andrew thanked him, kept going. They left town. The paved road turned to gravel at the 2 or 3 mile mark. Then it wasn't even gravel anymore, just a track of loose stones with tire ruts and cattle tracks. Andrew drove slowly. The truck bounced. Philomena gripped the door handle. The landscape was barren and beautiful at the same time. Low hills covered with creosote and prickly pear. An enormous sky, very blue, with white clouds scattered apart from one another. A few thin cows grazing on what little there was. A buzzard circling, silence. At mile 6 they saw the first property. A ranch with a wooden gate and a metal sign that read Harmony Ranch. At mile 9 they saw another, smaller, with no sign, with a dog chained up barking at nothing. At exactly mile 12, Andrew slowed down. On the right side, set along the track, was a metal gate closed with a chain. The gate was rusted. Above the gate, hung with wire, was a sign of old wood with letters painted by hand, faded by decades of sun, that read, Swallowtail Ranch. Philomena felt the air leave her chest. Andrew stopped the truck in front of the gate. He said nothing. He waited. Philomena said nothing either for almost a full minute. She looked at the sign. The letters had been made with a steady hand. A man's letters, letters that could have been made by Elliot. Though she couldn't be sure. It was painted lettering, not written. There was something in the shape of the S and the W that struck her as far too familiar. "You want me to wait here, Mum?" asked Andrew. Philomena swallowed. "Yes," she said, her voice steadier than she expected. "Wait here, don't move from here. If I'm a long time, don't worry, I'm going in." Andrew nodded. He turned off the truck's engine, took a cigarette from the glove box. Philomena got out, stepped onto the loose stones of the track, and walked the few paces that separated her from the gate. The rusted chain passed through 2 links and was fastened with a large padlock, also rusted. Philomena took the key from her purse and held it up to the padlock. The rust on the padlock and the rust on the key were the same color, the same age, the same apparent abandonment. Though abandonment wasn't the word, because inside the ranch, on the other side of the gate, Philomena could already see from there that something was not abandoned. There were fresh tire tracks in the dirt of the yard. There was a coop with live chickens peering out between the wires. There was laundry hanging on a line behind the house, far off, white and blue, moving in the breeze. Someone lived there. Someone lived there. Now. Today. This Sunday. She put the key in the padlock. The key went in scraping, with that dry scrape of rusted metal against rusted metal. Philomena clenched her teeth, turned. The key turned with a thick, slow screech, as though it were struggling to wake up. The padlock opened with a dull click. Philomena pulled the chain off, pushed one side of the gate. The gate opened with the long groan of things that don't move much, but still work. She went in. The dirt path inside the ranch ran maybe 100 yards from the gate to the house. It was a single-story house of white adobe with a tin roof, a porch out front held up by 4 mesquite posts. Beside it, a dry stone corral with goats. The goats, about 20 of them, gathered against the fence when they saw the strange woman. They didn't bleat. They looked at her. They were dark goats, thin with yellow eyes. On the other side of the house a well. Beyond it, a large acacia giving shade. On the porch, on a wooden chair, hung a straw hat. A man's hat. A hat that couldn't be Elliot's because Elliot was dead, but that was exactly like one he had owned. Philomena saw it from a distance, and her chest tightened. She walked toward the house. The sun was on her left side. She could feel the small stones under the soles of her shoes. She could feel her heart in her throat, but her head wasn't clouded. Her head was clear, a hard clarity, a clarity she hadn't had all week. Now that she was here, inside the land her husband had secretly owned, her mind was working as though someone had wiped it clean with a damp cloth on the inside. She reached the porch, climbed the 2 stone steps. The door of the house was made of rough wood, with the brown paint peeling away over the years. There was an iron knocker, also rusted, the same old color as the key. Philomena raised it. She stayed there with the knocker lifted, not knocking, for 2 long seconds. 2 seconds that held 38 years of Sundays. Then she knocked 3 firm times, nothing. She waited. The only sounds were the goats, the wind in the leaves of the acacia, a crow passing far off. She was about to knock again when she heard footsteps inside. Slow footsteps dragging like someone who walks with difficulty and with a cane. The footsteps came up to the door, stopped. There was a short silence on the other side. Philomena held her breath. The door opened. Philomena didn't move. The woman didn't either. And in that instant, before any words, something between the two of them had already been said. The woman on the other side of the door was small, thin, with white hair pulled into a tight bun. She had on a grey house dress with little flowers and an old pink cardigan over it. In her right hand she held a mesquite cane, polished smooth by the years. She was stooped, not much, just enough to notice. Her face was deeply wrinkled, with deep lines between the brows and at the sides of the mouth that spoke of many years of sun. But what Philomena saw first, and what she couldn't stop seeing, were the eyes. The woman's eyes were almost white. She had cataracts in both. The black pupil was there in the center, but around it was a milky veil eating at the iris. She was a woman who could barely see, who surely made out shapes, lights, shadows, but not faces, not details. And even so, with those nearly blind eyes, the woman knew who Philomena was. Philomena felt it. She felt it the way you feel things that can't be explained. The woman moved her head very slowly from side to side, as if to adjust a sight she no longer had, and her lips pressed together a moment. Then she spoke. "You're Elliot's wife," said the woman. It wasn't a question. It was a statement. The voice belonged to an older woman, but it was firm. A voice of old command, the voice of someone who has lived alone many years and has had to decide things on her own. Philomena felt her legs go weak. She steadied herself with a hand on the doorframe. She opened her mouth to say something, and nothing came out. She swallowed, tried again. "And you," she finally managed, "you're Josie." The woman gave the slightest nod. "I am," she said. "Come in. I've been expecting you. Not today, but I've been expecting you." She took a step back to let her pass. Philomena didn't move. She couldn't. Her feet didn't respond. She could still feel the rusted key in her hand, though it was no longer in her hand. It was back at the gate, hanging from the padlock. But the weight of the rusted metal stayed there, in her fingers, in her palm, in her skin, as though it had worked its way inside her body. "Come in," Josie repeated softly. "It's hot out there. In here it's cooler. I have water, I have coffee, whatever you'd like. But come in, Mum. For many years now I've had things to tell you. And I want to ask you something before we go on. Stay with me here, with me and with Philomena, on the other side of this door that has just opened. Because what Josie is about to tell this woman, what Philomena is about to hear sitting in the front room of this ranch she didn't know existed, is going to change everything she believed she knew about 38 years of marriage. Everything. And it isn't what you're thinking right now, it isn't. Hit the like button on this video now, subscribe to the channel if you haven't already, and write me one single thing in the comments. If you were Philomena, standing in that doorway with an old woman in front of you who knows the name of your dead husband, with a whole lifetime of questions behind you, would you cross that threshold, or would you turn around and leave? Write me your answer. I'll be back with you in a moment. Philomena is about to step into that house, and the truth, the whole truth, is sitting on the other side of that door, waiting for a woman who came in a blue pickup all the way from Lanesboro with a rusted key in her purse and 47 years of marriage on her back. Philomena went in. She crossed the threshold with the slowness of someone crossing a river without knowing whether there's a bottom. Her black shoes, the same ones from church, touched the worn cement floor of the front room. Inside, the house was cooler, yes, as Josie had said. It smelled of firewood gone out from the night before, of reheated coffee, of dried herbs hanging from some corner, the smell of a lived-in house, a smell that wasn't foreign, a smell that in some fold of memory Philomena recognized without knowing from where. The front room was small, a wooden table in the center with 2 chairs, a black cast-iron wood stove against the back wall, an old cupboard with glass doors, a dish rack with blue enamel plates stacked up, a small window looking out onto the backyard with a white cotton curtain tied back with a ribbon. In one corner, a much-used wicker armchair with an embroidered cushion on it. On the wall, 2 nails. On one nail, an old calendar from the year 2020 with an image of the Madonna. On the other nail, a portrait. Philomena didn't see the portrait at first. She saw it a few seconds later, when her eyes adjusted to the dimness. It was a portrait framed in wood, the kind they sell in dime stores, and inside the frame was a black and white photograph. A young man, maybe 25 or 30, white shirt, a thin mustache, looking at the camera with that seriousness men had in old photographs. It wasn't Elliot. Philomena let out her breath. She hadn't realized she'd been holding it since the gate. That man in the photo was not her husband. There was something familiar about him, a distant resemblance, but it wasn't Elliot. The chin was different, the eyes were different. It was another man. "Sit down, ma'am," said Josie, pointing to one of the chairs at the table. Philomena sat. Josie walked slowly to the cupboard, leaning on the mesquite cane. Each step cost her a little, but she knew the house by heart. She took out 2 enamel cups, set them on the table, put the coffee pot on one of the lit burners. The pot already had coffee made, it seemed, because the moment she touched it, it began to smell. "I've had it hot since 6, said Josie. "I get up early. My eyes don't let me see well anymore, but my hands still find things." Philomena nodded without saying anything. There were no words yet. Josie poured the coffee. Her hands trembled a little as she poured, but she didn't spill. She put the pot back on the burner and sat down across from Philomena on the other side of the table. She rested the cane against the edge. "Don't worry," said Josie. "Drink your coffee, then we'll talk. I've kept this for many years, ma'am. A few more minutes won't hurt anyone." Philomena took the cup in her hands. The enamel was hot. She closed her fingers around the warmth. She needed it. Her fingers still held the rusted feel of the key's metal, rough and cold, and the hot enamel of the coffee was the opposite. Exactly the opposite. A living touch, a present touch, a touch that anchored her to the hour. She took a sip. It was percolator coffee with brown sugar and cinnamon. It was strong. It did her good. Josie drank too. She had very thin hands, with the veins standing out, with dark spots from many years of sun. The nails short clean, a thin silver ring on the ring finger of her left hand, an old ring from long ago. "How long ago did he die?" asked Josie, without lifting her face from the cup. 7 months, said Philomena. Josie nodded slowly. "I knew," she said. "Nobody told me. Nobody came to tell me. But one Sunday he didn't come. Then another Sunday. Then another. I kept count. When 4 Sundays passed without him, I knew." Philomena felt something in her chest, a pressure that wasn't crying, but was close. Josie had counted 4 Sundays. 4 Sundays waiting for him. So Elliot had come here every Sunday he went out, twice a month here. "I didn't know anything," said Philomena in a low voice. "Nothing. I didn't know about the ranch. I didn't know about you. I didn't know. I found out a week ago." Josie lifted her face. Her nearly white eyes looked in Philomena's direction, though they didn't see her well. But they looked at her. "I know," she said. "He told me, years ago. He told me you'd never know. He told me he'd decided it that way, and I respected it. Even though I didn't always agree, ma'am, I'll tell you that to your face. I told Elliot many times, one day you'll die, and your wife will show up here knowing nothing. She'll come with the face of someone who believes the worst. And he'd tell me, don't worry, Josie, I've already left everything in order. She'll come when she has to come, and she'll understand." Philomena stayed quiet. "Understand what?" she asked. Her voice came out firmer than she expected. Josie sighed, closed her eyes a moment, then opened them. The nearly white eyes looked like 2 small moons, 2 tired moons. "Before I speak," she said, "I'm going to ask you something. Ma'am, what did you think when you came? What did you think you were going to find here?" Philomena opened her mouth, closed it, opened it again. "I thought a lot of things," she said. "Almost all of them bad. The worst, that Elliot had another woman, another family, other children. I thought I'd walk into this house and see a shrine, and a woman and some children who weren't mine. I thought my marriage had been a lie, and that they'd let me have the leftover side of it. She said it without a tremor. She said it clearly. Josie listened without interrupting. When Philomena finished, Josie nodded. Anyone would have thought that, she said. I would have thought it in your place. But no, ma'am, it wasn't that. Josie put both hands on the table, one beside the other, old, veined, tired. My name is Josie Sutton. I'm 79 years old. I was born here, on this land, in 1947. This house was built by my father in the 40s, with his own hands, adobe by adobe. I was born in that very bed you'll see later if you want in the back bedroom. And in this house I'm going to die, ma'am. In that same bed, if God lets me choose. Philomena said nothing. She only listened. I had a brother, Josie went on. His name was Jerome Sutton. He was born 3 years before me in 44. My brother was a good man. He worked this land his whole life. The goats you saw outside are descended from the goats he started raising back in the 60s. He dug the well himself, the house he kept fixing up. My brother never married. He had no children, no wife. He was a reserved man. Josie paused, drank some coffee, continued. My brother Jerome died in 1987, of illness, a long illness. I cared for him here until his very last day. When he died, he left this ranch to me. The 4 acres, the house, the goats, the well, all of it. He left it to me in writing, with a notary's papers in Greenbrier. But there was a condition, Mum, one single condition. Josie lifted her face. Her nearly white eyes pointed toward Philomena. The condition was that the property, on paper, be put in the name of Elliot Cates. Philomena felt a chill. She squeezed the cup between her hands. Why? She asked in a thread of voice. Josie smiled faintly, a sad smile, long, settled into place. Because Elliot was the only man in the world my brother trusted, and because I, ma'am, in 1987, could not own a property in my own name. What do you mean you couldn't? I couldn't, repeated Josie. For reasons I'm going to tell you now slowly. Drink your coffee, it's getting cold. Philomena obeyed. She drank. The coffee was still warm, still good. Josie waited until she set the cup down before going on. I married very young, ma'am. At 19 I married a man from the next county over named Percival. A good name, a bad man. Percival drank. He drank a lot, and when he drank, he was another man. He came to hit me. The first time was 6 months into the marriage. I gave him 3 chances, ma'am. I was raised that way. The women back then put up with it. But on the 3rd time I left. I left with 1 change of clothes and what I had on my back. I came back here, to my father's house, who was still alive then. My mother had already died. My brother Jerome took me in. He said, "You stay here, Josie, and whoever comes looking for you will have to go through me first." Josie stopped. She breathed. Percival came looking for me twice. The first time my brother ran him off with a rifle in his hand. The second time 3 years later. He didn't come alone. But that's another story that has nothing to do with today. The point, Mum, is that Percival and I never divorced. In those years, it wasn't easy to divorce. The church didn't allow it, the family looked badly on it, and I, to be honest, didn't want to see his face ever again. I'd rather be an abandoned woman than have to go find him to sign a paper. And he never came asking for a divorce either, because he left for the West Coast in 78 and never came back. We heard through others that he died out there in the early 90s. But while he was alive, legally, I was his wife. Legally. Anything I had in my own name he could come and claim. The property, the livestock, the land, all of it. Philomena began to understand a little. Not all of it yet. So Jerome, my brother, Josie went on, when he was dying and had to decide what to do with the ranch, he couldn't leave it to me, not directly. If he left it to me, Percival could come and claim half, and even if Percival died, his relatives could come and claim. The lawyer my brother consulted in the city told him plainly, "You have to leave it in the name of a man you trust absolutely, who'll look after it for your sister, but who on paper will be the owner." Josie looked at her hands on the table. My brother didn't have many men he trusted, Ma'am. He was a man who had lived alone, but he had one. Elliot Cates. Philomena lifted her face. How did he know Elliot? Josie smiled again with that sad smile. That's the most beautiful part of the story, and the part that hurts me most that you never knew. Elliot and my brother Jerome met on the railroad, ma'am, when they were both 18. Elliot had just started working on the tracks. My brother used to ship loads of goats up north to sell them, and he used the train. They became companions in '69, then close friends. Then my brother became godfather to his oldest son, to Owen. Philomena went still. Owen. Her son Owen. Owen's baptismal godfather had been a man from the city she had never known well, because she had been away the day of the baptism. And Elliot had said a friend stood in for him by proxy, a man named Jerome. Philomena had always thought he was a distant relative. She had met him only once at Owen's 5th birthday, a tall, quiet man who had brought the boy a little wooden goat, hand-carved. Owen kept that toy until he was 15. Then it got lost. Jerome Sutton, said Philomena in a low voice. Yes, said Josie. My brother, the godfather of your oldest son. Philomena closed her eyes a moment, opened them. Go on, she said. Josie went on. My brother and Elliot were very close friends for years. They'd go hunting 2 or 3 times a year. They got together for the big holidays. They loved each other like brothers. Elliot never brought you here, Mom, because that was how my brother decided it at one point. And that was how it stayed. Jerome didn't like having people at the ranch. He was a man made for solitude. He said visitors stirred up the goats. But he would receive Elliot, and Elliot came alone. And so it became the habit. And when Jerome got sick in '87, it was Elliot who drove him to and from the hospital in the city. It was Elliot who stayed the last nights. And it was Elliot who held my hand when my brother died in the early hours of an October 10th. Josie was quiet a moment. That same early morning, she said, after my brother closed his eyes, Elliot said to me, Josie, your brother made me swear something and I'm going to keep it. You will live here until your last day. This ranch will be in my name on the papers because that's how he wanted it. But the owner will be you, and I'll come twice a month to help you with whatever you need until you die or until I die, whichever comes first. What he asked of me, I will do. Josie breathed deep. And he kept it, ma'am. 38 years keeping it. Twice a month without fail, except during the pandemic, when there were a few months he couldn't come. But afterward he came and caught up. He brought me my medicine. He fixed the roof when a piece of it caved in during the rains in 2010. He helped me take the goats down to sell in the years I couldn't anymore. He brought a private doctor when I had a kidney infection in 2015. He paid for the glasses that didn't end up helping me much anyway. He brought a grandson of his, the boy Owen, just once when he was small, maybe 8 years old. Owen doesn't remember because he was told they were going to see a buddy's goats. But he came. He was here. He sat in that wicker chair you see there. He ate a bean taco made with a tortilla I rolled by hand. After that, Elliot never brought him again, because the boy asked too many questions and Elliot didn't want to lie. Philomena felt the tears rise for the first time since she'd walked into that house. Not tears of rage. Other tears. Tears she couldn't name. My husband took care of you, said Philomena slowly. Your husband kept a promise, answered Josie, and he kept it without a single flaw. I owe him everything, ma'am, everything. Without Elliot, I'd have died alone on this ranch in any one of these years. A cold winter, an illness you can't cure on your own. I'd have died and nobody would have found out, because nobody comes up here without a reason. Elliot was my reason. Elliot was my twice a month. Elliot was the one who made sure I wasn't alone in the world. Josie left a long pause. The house was silent. Outside, a goat bleated once and went quiet. And now you'll understand, ma'am, said Josie, why he didn't tell you anything. My brother made him swear the matter would stay between the two of them, that you wouldn't know, that nobody would know. In fact, so there would be no problems with the papers in case Percival showed up. Elliot swore it to my brother on his deathbed. And your husband, ma'am, never broke an oath in his life, not to the living and not to the dead. Philomena lowered her face. A tear fell on the back of the hand, still holding the cup. The back of the hand, that still, in some fold of skin, held the rough feel of the rusted metal of that morning, of that week, of that life. "Why didn't he tell me afterward?" asked Philomena. "When Percival died, when there was no more danger, why didn't he tell me afterward?" Josie sighed. "I asked him that myself many times," she said, "and he always answered the same. He'd say, 'Josie, if I tell her now, it'll be worse, because I won't just be telling her I have a ranch in my name. I'll be telling her I lied to her for 20 years and then 22, and then—' And I'd tell him each time another decade went by, that each time it got harder for him. The silence had become heavier than the truth. He thought that if you found out while he was alive, there'd be a break he couldn't bear. He preferred to leave you the key and the address for when he was gone, so you'd come without him, so you'd talk to me, so you'd understand the whole matter before judging the man who died." Philomena stayed quiet a long while. The tears kept falling in silence, without a sob, without a sound. She cried the way a seamstress cries, in small, straight, steady stitches. Josie didn't interrupt her. She gave her time. 5 minutes passed like that, perhaps 10. Philomena couldn't say. Then Josie stood up slowly, leaned on the mesquite cane, walked to the cupboard, took out a clean handkerchief and gave it to Philomena. Philomena took it. She dried her cheeks. "Thank you," she said. "Don't mention it, ma'am. Call me Philomena." "Thank you, Philomena. Call me Josie." The two of them smiled a little, a small smile, tense, new. Josie sat back down. "May I see something?" asked Philomena suddenly. "Will you let me see his things? The things he had here?" Josie nodded. "Come." They both stood up, Josie with the cane, Philomena behind her. They walked down a short hallway toward the back room, the one Josie had mentioned, the room where she had been born and where she was going to die. Inside, there was a simple bed, an old wardrobe, a little table with an image of the Madonna. Josie opened the wardrobe. "Look," she said. Inside, hung on wooden hangers, were 3 shirts, one pale green, one pale blue, one beige. Men's shirts. Elliot's shirts. Philomena recognized them at once. They were his shirts, the ones he wore when he went out on Sundays, the ones he said got stained from the fence work with Theodore. They were hanging there in this wardrobe, ready for the next Sunday he never came to. "He kept them here to be comfortable," said Josie. "He'd come in his regular shirt, change into these to work, and before he left he'd put his own back on. You said you didn't know about these shirts. You never saw him wearing them." Philomena touched one of the shirts, the green one, and smelled it without meaning to. Even after 7 months, something of Elliot's smell was still in it. Not much, a little, but something. And Philomena, standing in front of the wardrobe, in the room of an old woman who was the widow of her husband's dead best friend, smelled her Elliot for the last time. She knew it was the last time. She knew it, and she didn't rush. She stayed there a long minute with her cheek pressed to the green fabric, saying goodbye to a smell she would never again have within reach in the world. When she pulled away, Josie was standing quietly beside her. "I never washed them," said Josie, "so something would be kept." Philomena nodded without speaking. "Is there anything else he left here?" "Come," said Josie. Josie led her to a corner of the same room. There, on a low table, was a simple wooden box of cedar, hand-carved. Josie touched it with the tip of the cane. "Open it," she said. "It's yours now." Philomena sat on the bed, put the box on her knees, opened it. Inside there were things. Papers, envelopes, photos. Philomena took them out one by one. First a deed in the name of Elliot Cates, dated 1987, for the property called Swallowtail Ranch, 4 acres, Greenbrier County, with a notary's signatures and seals. Second, a will of Elliot's, dated 2020, signed and notarized in Lanesborough. Philomena unfolded it, read it. The will said that in the event of his death, ownership of Swallowtail Ranch passed in its entirety to Josie Sutton for the duration of her life, and that upon Josie's death, the property passed in full to Philomena Cates, his wife, who could do with it as she wished. There was a clause that said that while Josie lived, Philomena was bound morally, though not legally, to respect the decision that Josie live on the ranch. Morally, not legally. He had trusted her. Third, a letter. A sealed envelope, no stamp, with a single word written in blue ink in Elliot's right slanted hand. Philomena. Philomena held the letter with both hands. She didn't open it there. Fourth, photographs. There were 6 or 7. Philomena looked at them one by one. A young Elliot with Jerome Sutton, the two of them with their hands on each other's shoulders in front of a freight train in the year 69 by what was written on the back. Elliot and Jerome eating tacos at a stand. Elliot holding a baby Philomena recognized as Owen. Owen was about 6 months old. The photo was dated on the back, 1979. Happy Godfathers, it said on the reverse in another man's handwriting, Jerome's, surely. Fifth, an account book, an old notebook with ruled lines where Elliot had written down for years what he spent on the ranch. Josie's medicine, the parts for the well, the roofing tin in 2010, the private doctor in 2015, the beans by the pound, the sugar, the coffee. Decades of small, carefully kept accounts, decades of silence that wasn't absence. Philomena closed the box, held it against her chest, and stayed sitting on the edge of Josie's bed with the box in her arms, and cried for real for the first time since the burial. A long cry, wide, ancient. A cry that held the Elliot dead in the yard with the shears in his hand, the Elliot at the fundraiser in 72 asking her for a lemonade just to look at her. The railroad Elliot, the mill Elliot, the father Elliot, the friend of Jerome Elliot, the Elliot swearing to look after a woman on a deathbed, the Elliot hauling tin onto an adobe roof in 2010, the Elliot bathing before supper on Sundays because he came home with the dust of the ranch on him, the quiet Elliot, all of Elliot in that cry, the Elliot she had known, and the Elliot she never knew existed. They were the same man. They had always been the same man. She was the one who had missed half of him. Josie put a hand on her shoulder, let her cry, didn't speak. When Philomena calmed down, she lifted her face. Josie, Philomena said, I'm going to honor what my husband asked. You stay here as long as you want, as long as you live. I won't touch a thing. I'll come to see you once a month at least, the way he came. Josie smiled, but shook her head slowly. No, Philomena. No. No. I can't live here alone anymore. My eyes won't give me any more. Last month I fell on my way to the well. I was able to get up because I still have some strength, but next time maybe not. Elliot came twice a month, and that was enough for me. Now that Elliot is gone, someone comes to bring me my groceries from town every 10 days. But it isn't the same. I'm 79 years old now, Philomena, and I'm alone. More alone than a woman my age should be. What do you want, then? Asked Philomena. Josie sat down beside her on the bed. The two women together, 168 and 179. Take the box, Philomena. Read your husband's letter at home calmly, and then if you decide, come find me. I'll go with you to Lanesborough, to your house. I don't know how we'll manage it, but I can't stay here anymore. If you don't want to take me, I understand. I'll find myself a home. We'll sell the ranch. I have savings Elliot left me, little by little. It's enough to finish out my days in a decent home in the city. It's not a tragedy. No, said Philomena quickly. You're not going to a home. You're coming with me. Josie looked at her. The nearly white eyes glistened a moment. Are you sure? I'm sure. Think about it carefully, Philomena. I'm not your relative. I'm the woman your husband looked after in secret. Your sons won't understand. My sons will understand, said Philomena, whatever I tell them. And I'm going to tell them the truth. The whole truth. I have no reason to carry the silence my husband carried. Elliot left me a rusted key and an address. He didn't leave me an oath. I'm free. Josie nodded slowly. You're a brave woman, Philomena. I'm a seamstress, said Philomena, and I'm tired. They sat a while longer. Then Philomena stood up and walked to the front room. Josie followed with the cane. From the window, Philomena saw Andrew's blue pickup waiting outside the gate. Andrew was still there, smoking his second cigarette. I'm going to talk to the man who brought me, said Philomena. I'll see if he can come back next week for the two of us. I won't be able to come load up your things today. I need time. I have to talk to my sons first. I have to read the letter. I have to think. Does next Sunday work for you? I'll come for you." "It works," said Josie. "I'll wait for you here. I'm not going anywhere." Philomena smiled for the first time, a small but true smile. "May I ask one more thing?" said Josie. "Whatever you'd like." "Will you lend me a key to the well or something from the ranch to take with me?" "No, not the gate key. That one I'll leave with you. Something small, a keepsake." Josie thought a moment, then walked to the kitchen, opened a drawer, took out something, and put it in Philomena's open palm. It was a button of old bone, 4 holes, an ivory color gone yellow with time, about the size of an old silver dollar. "This button," said Josie, "I found years ago in the yard, buried near the corral. I don't know whose it was. I don't know when it fell. I kept it because I liked it. I've had it in that drawer for about 15 years. It's a button nobody claims. You take it. Seamstresses like buttons." Philomena closed her hand around the bone button, pressed it against her palm, then put it carefully in her purse, beside the handkerchief where she'd wrapped the rusted key, beside Elliot's letter she hadn't yet opened. "Thank you, Josie." "Thank you, Philomena." They embraced in the doorway, a short embrace of 2 women not used to embracing, but an embrace. Philomena went out into the sun. She walked the 100 yards across the yard to the gate. Andrew saw her coming, dropped the cigarette, straightened up. He didn't ask anything. Philomena got into the truck. "To Lanesboro, Andrew?" "Yes, ma'am." Philomena closed the chain on the gate from the outside before getting in. She put the rusted key in her purse. The gate stayed behind. The ranch stayed behind. The goats watched the truck go by between the wires. Josie came to the doorway, small and white and nearly blind, and raised her hand. Philomena waved back from inside the truck. She made the drive back in silence. She didn't cry, she didn't speak. Andrew drove just as silently as on the way there. The only difference was that this time Philomena didn't have the purse on her lap with only the rusted key inside. Now she had a cedar box on her lap too, with the deed, the will, the photographs, the account book, the sealed envelope and the bone button, and a ranch that would someday be hers. And an old woman who would be hers from the following Sunday on, and a dead husband who had been a different man than she believed, and yet had been exactly the same one. He had been all of it. She had only seen half. They reached Lanesboro at noon. Andrew dropped her at her door. Philomena paid him the $50 plus an extra 20. Andrew took off his cap. "If you ever need to go back, Ma'am, just say the word." "Thank you, Andrew. Next week I'll need you. I'll be here." Philomena went into the house, locked the door, set the box on the kitchen table, sat down, breathed, opened her purse, took out the letter, the white envelope with a single word, Philomena. She opened it with the little scissors from her apron. Inside was a sheet of notebook paper, written on both sides in the right slanted hand. She read it. The letter said more or less, though afterward Philomena couldn't remember every word, that if she was reading it, it was because he was gone, and because she had found the key he had hidden in the lining of a tweed jacket. It said he had thought 100 times about telling her while he was alive, and had never found the moment, because the more time passed, the harder it got for him. It said he asked her forgiveness, not for the lie, because what he'd done wasn't a lie but a silence, but for the weight of the silence itself. It said that Jerome Sutton had been his chosen brother, and that looking after Josie had been the thing that had mattered most to him in life, after looking after her and the children. It said he asked, if she could, if her heart would let her, that she not abandon Josie, that if she couldn't take her in, she should put her in a good home, that there was money saved in a bank account in her name with him as co-signer at the bank in Lanesboro, downtown branch, the passbook in the document drawer. It said he had never loved her any less for carrying this secret. On the contrary, it said he had never loved another woman in the world but her. It said that if they found each other again on the other side, he would have many things to tell her, and that if they didn't find each other again, then he asked her to forgive him for having died before he could speak. And it was signed, "Elliot, your husband, always." Philomena read the letter twice, folded it, put it back in the envelope, set the envelope on the table. Then she did 3 things. The first, she called Owen. She told him, "Son, I need you to come this Wednesday. There's something I have to tell you and your brother by video call with Randall. It's important, it's about your dad." "No, it's not bad. It's complicated, but it's not bad. I'll be waiting for you." The second, she took out the bank passbook, opened it, saw that there was indeed an account in her name with Elliot as co-signer, with a balance that wasn't large, but was enough to care for Josie with dignity for many years. Philomena closed the passbook. The third, she took the mayonnaise jar down from the shelf, uncapped it, took out the bone button Josie had given her, washed it under the faucet until the yellowed ivory recovered a little of its original color, dried it with a cloth and let it drop into the jar with the other 214 now. The following Wednesday, Owen arrived at 11 in the morning from the city. At noon, Philomena got Randall on a video call from Houston. The two sons, the mother, the three of them in a front room that smelled of percolator coffee and orange blossom, which was already beginning to bloom again for the new season. Philomena told them everything. She told them about the ranch, about Josie, about Jerome Sutton, Owen's godfather, who turned out to be more than a godfather, about the promise, the silence, the letter, the cedar box, the decision. Owen cried. Randall, on the other side of the screen, cried too. The two sons, grown men now, stayed a few minutes without knowing what to say. Then Owen spoke first. "Mom," he said, "whatever you decide is fine. If you want to bring Josie, we'll bring Josie. I'll help you. We'll set her up in the guest room, I'll paint the room, I'll get whatever's needed." Randall from Houston said, "And I'll cover the transportation, Mom. This week I'll send money so you can pay the man who drives you and fix up the room." Philomena nodded. She didn't cry this time. She smiled, a quiet smile, the smile of a woman who has been heard by her sons after a long time. The following Sunday, Philomena went back to Swallowtail Ranch with Andrew. This time she didn't go alone. Owen went with her. Owen, at 44, came to know for the second time in his life the ranch where he had been as a child without knowing it. He met Josie. Josie, who could barely see anymore, put her old thin hand on Owen's face. She felt his cheekbones, his forehead, his chin. "You're my godson," said Josie. "Yes, Ma'am," said Owen. "I held you when you were 3 months old. You were a beautiful baby." "Thank you, godmother." Owen cried again. Josie didn't cry. She had no tears left for crying out of joy, but she smiled. They loaded Josie's things into the truck. 2 suitcases, a sack, old photographs, the image of the Madonna from the little table, the mesquite cane, a wool blanket her mother had knitted in the 50s. They left the ranch with the goats in the care of a man from town that Philomena would begin to pay monthly. They locked the house with the same rusted key, and Philomena put it away in her purse. The drive back was different. Philomena was at the wheel of her own affairs without being at the wheel of the car. Owen drove a rented car behind Andrew's truck, Andrew up front, and Josie sitting beside Philomena in the cab, the cane between her knees and one hand on the door handle. The barren landscape passed outside. The light of the late afternoon was golden, the way the morning light had been golden on that first trip, but everything was different. Halfway down the road, Josie spoke for the first time in a long while. "Philomena." "Yes, Josie. That jar of buttons you had the other time, do you still have it?" "I have it. It's on the shelf in my front room." "Good. When we get there, show it to me." "I'll show it to you." Josie nodded. She adjusted her pink cardigan. She closed her eyes a moment, leaning against the seat back. The wind coming in through the window moved a strand of white hair across her forehead. They reached Lanesboro at nightfall. The railroad neighborhood was lit up with its yellow street lamps. The dogs barked. Tessa saw them arrive from the window across the street and ran over with a pot of broth for supper. Mr. Barlow offered to help carry the suitcases. Josie, getting down from the truck leaning on Owen and on her cane, set foot for the first time in her life on the ground of the railroad neighborhood. She couldn't see well with her eyes, but she smelled. She smelled damp earth, bougainvillea, orange blossom from some yard. She sniffed the air the way older people sniff at the new. "It smells like fruit," said Josie. "It's the orange trees," said Philomena. "I like it." They went inside. Philomena had prepared the guest room for Josie. The room that had been Randall's when he was a boy and had later served as a storeroom, and that Owen had painted over the last 3 days. They put the bed with clean sheets, put the image of the Madonna on the little table, hung the wool blanket of Josie's mother over a chair, put the cane beside the bed. They ate Tessa's broth. Owen told the 2 older women an old joke that his wife's grandmother used to tell, and the 3 of them laughed. After supper, Philomena took the mayonnaise jar down from the shelf, set it on the table, uncapped it. "Look, Josie," she said. Josie came close, brought her face almost up to the glass. The nearly white eyes looked without seeing well, but they looked. "That's a lot of buttons," she said. 214, said Philomena. "The last one you gave me." She put her fingers into the jar, searched among the buttons with her fingertips like someone searching for a letter in Braille. She found it. The bone button, a little bigger than the others, different to the touch. She took it out. She put it in Josie's palm. "Here's yours." Josie closed her fingers around the button, brought it to her chest, closed her eyes. "Thank you, Philomena." "Thank you, Josie." The 2 of them stayed quiet. The room smelled of percolator coffee. Outside, the crickets began their night song. The orange trees in the yard, the 2 that were left, moved their leaves in the warm night air. The black foot-pedal singer rested in its corner, still, waiting for the next day. In the yard, on the orange tree that Elliot had left unpruned, the high branch on the left side was still tangled. Philomena, when Josie had gone to bed that first night, went out into the yard with the garden shears, stretched her arm up to the branch. She reached it. It wasn't that high. He hadn't reached it because he was tired that day, Philomena thought now, because he had spent years doing more things than she had known, because he had carried in silence the weight of 2 lives. She cut the branch, lowered her arm, looked at the whole orange tree for the first time in 7 months. It was even. It was pruned. It was ready for the new season. She left the shears on the chair where Elliot used to sit to read the paper. She sat for a moment on the step beside the empty chair. She didn't speak out loud. This time she didn't ask Elliot what he had done. She already knew. She stayed sitting a while, looking at the sky over the railroad neighborhood, which is a small-town sky with many stars. She remembered the fundraiser in '72. She remembered the lean young man with the black mustache who came over 3 times to ask for a lemonade just to look at her. She smiled a little, went inside, locked the door, passed by Josie's room. Josie was already asleep, breathing calmly. Philomena went into her own room, put on the white nightgown, sat on the edge of the bed. From the nightstand drawer she took out the rusted key. She looked at it, the rough feel, the orange rust, the old metal, the key that had opened a padlock and had opened, without her knowing, a whole life. She held it a moment in her palm, felt its weight, felt the cold, felt the history. Then she opened the book of poems by Emily Dickinson that was on the nightstand. It wasn't hers. It was a book Randall had left there years before, and that she had never read. Between 2 pages, near the front, she folded Elliot's letter and tucked it away. Beside the letter, on the same pages, she set the rusted key. She closed the book, put it in the nightstand drawer, closed the drawer, turned off the light. She lay down. She slept. Outside the window, the sky over Lanesborough went on with its stars. A rooster crowed too early in some block of the railroad neighborhood. Terre Bougainvillea let itself be moved by the wind, and in the guest room an old woman of 79, nearly blind, with the bone button pressed against her chest inside her closed hand, slept for the first time in 38 years in a house that wasn't her own, kept company by the widow of the man who had kept a whole promise with her, without missing twice a month for an entire lifetime. And that's what I wanted to tell you tonight. The story of Philomena Cates, seamstress of Lanesborough, widow of Elliot Cates, now the owner of a jar with 214 buttons and a ranch in Greenbrier County that she will one day have to hand over to her sons, but not yet. If you made it all the way here with me, thank you. Thank you truly, because there are stories that don't amount to anything without someone to listen to them, and you listened to this one. So let me ask you one last thing before we say goodbye. In the comments, if you'd like, write me one word. Just one. The word you would say to someone who left without saying everything they had to say. One word for that brother who died first, for that mother who stayed silent, for that husband who carried his own box without ever opening it. One word. I'll read them all, I'll keep them. Because the words we keep for the ones who are gone end up being sometimes the most important ones we say in our lives. Hit the like button if this story moved something inside you. Subscribe to the channel if you haven't already, so we can keep telling these stories together. And take good care of yourself tonight. Truly take care. Because life is short, and Sundays go by fast, and you never know which branch is going to be left unpruned. Until next time.